Hey up Internet, welcome back to Black Sofa, and this time I'm going to be responding to a video by Ruth Jackson from Youth Apologetics entitled Can You Prove God Exists? This is a good question. Let's see if Miss Jackson provides us with a satisfactory answer.
Can we prove that God exists? Well, it kind of depends what we mean by proof. True proof only exists in maths. I can 100% prove to you that 2 plus 2 is always going to equal 4.
I should think so too.
But even scientists need a certain amount of faith.
Okay, let's suppose you are right, that even scientists need faith. A scientific hypothesis is based on what we already know to be true. Scientific investigation is based on what we can either detect with our five senses or what we can detect with apparatus that aid our five senses, like a telescope or a microscope, for example. Scientists study what they can see, touch, taste, hear, or smell in the natural world. So even if they do need a certain amount of faith, it is hardly the same as religious faith in the supernatural world. Faith in things we cannot see, touch, taste, hear, or smell is blind faith.
In order to even do science, they have to believe that there's an order to the world, that things will react in a certain way because forces like gravity are at work. Proof in science is similar to a law court. Lawyers speak of proof beyond reasonable doubt. They can't mathematically prove that someone did the crime, but they can build up a case using things like confession, eyewitnesses, and documentary evidence. And it's this type of proof that I think we can offer when it comes to God. So here are some of those arguments or proofs, if you will. The argument from morality. The idea that we have an inbuilt sense of right and wrong. That we have an instinctive sense, for example, that rape is always wrong.
Yes, I agree. Most of us agree that rape is wrong. But it is a leap of logic to assert that this points to a law inside of us. It is an even bigger leap of logic to assert that this points to a lawgiver, let alone that it points to your lawgiver in particular. And the fact that most of us human beings, supposedly made in the image of God, believe that rape is always wrong, actually hurts your case for God rather than helps it. Yahweh didn't always think that rape was wrong. Otherwise, he would have included it in the Big Ten. You shall not rape. But he didn't. He did, however, include a law that states that if a man rapes a woman who is still a virgin, he need only pay some money to the girl's father and he gets off scot-free. The poor girl, however, must marry her rapist and stay with him until he dies. This is from Deuteronomy chapter 22, verses 28 to 29. If God made us in his image, surely his morality should reflect our own, not just at the time Deuteronomy was written, but for all generations. His morality should be consistent yesterday, today, and tomorrow. But instead it seems that Yahweh's morality is the same as desert-dwelling tribes who lived over 3,000 years ago.
This points us to a law inside of us, which in turn points to a lawgiver, someone outside of ourselves who's put that law inside us. Then the aesthetic argument, which is basically just a fancy word for the idea that art and beauty point to something outside of us. A character in a book called Chasing Francis, about a church pastor who loses his faith, says this: "The object of all great art is beauty, and it makes us nostalgic for God." Francis Collins, who's one of the world's leading scientists, used to be an atheist, and the thing that finally convinced him that God existed was looking at a beautiful frozen waterfall.
Really? That's what finally convinced him? A waterfall? That's pretty lame. Especially for Francis Collins, who discovered the genes associated with several diseases and who led the Human Genome Project. That aside, beauty doesn't point us to something outside of us. It points to something inside of us, our brains. And even if it does ultimately point to something outside of us, it doesn't prove that something is a God, let alone your specific God.
Then you've got the argument from desire. The feeling that there's more to life than this points to the fact that we don't belong here.
Even though, at times, we humans wonder whether or not there is more to life than this, this does not point to the fact that we don't belong here. Your assertion that we don't belong here is not a fact, it is merely your opinion. If you are talking about belonging in heaven or another world, there is no evidence that such a world exists. We do belong in this world. There is no meaning to life except for the meaning that we make for ourselves.
C.S. Lewis said, "If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world." Then we've got the argument from cosmology, another fancy word which comes from the Greek for world, cosmos, and study, logios. The fact that the existence of the universe points to the existence of a God who created it. When scientists began to talk about the Big Bang theory in the early 1930s, atheists tried to get rid of that theory because it supported the Christian idea that the universe had a beginning. And if the universe had a beginning, then something or someone must have kick-started that process.
No, the existence of the universe does not point to the existence of a God that created it. Just because we don't know exactly how the universe came into existence, you cannot simply put a God into that gap in our knowledge, and more is being understood about abiogenesis all the time. I don't understand abiogenesis, so I suggest you watch Aaron Ra's video about it. I'll put a link in the description. Even if someone or something kick-started the Big Bang, it is a huge leap of logic to assert that it was God, let alone your God, as I have already stated.
Then you've got the argument from design. Even atheist scientists talk about the universe being finely tuned. If a tiny change was made in something like the gases in the air or how close the Earth is to the Sun, then life would be impossible. Is everything perfectly in balance because of chance? Or could it be that someone has put it all together, someone's finely tuned it?
The universe is hardly finely tuned for life, far from it. There may be life on our planet, but our planet is but a tiny, microscopic speck in our galaxy, and our galaxy is a tiny microscopic speck in the vastness of the universe. If a god finally tuned the universe for life, the universe would be teeming with sentient, intelligent life, not just on a tiny, insignificant blue marble. And the human body is not brilliantly designed. Take our eyes, for example. The retina is back to front. Squid's eyes are better designed than ours. And I'll put a link to a video in the description where a friend of mine explains this a lot better.
And look at how complicated humans are. Could this maybe point to a God who designed us? Isaac Newton said, "In the absence of any other proof, the thumb alone would convince me of God's existence." Then you've got the argument for resurrection. This needs a whole other video, but if Jesus really rose from the dead, then this shows that he must have been God.
And that is a very big if. And she is right. It does require a whole nother video. I suggest you watch Bart Ehrman's video on the topic. I'll put a link in the description. But basically, there is no evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ outside of the Gospels. And even the Gospel accounts contradict each other.
And finally, what I think is one of the most important arguments, one of the most important proofs, is the argument from personal experience. Ask any Christian how they know that God exists, and they will have their own unique story that they can share with you.
Anecdotes are not evidence. If they were, I could prove to you that I have a personal relationship with an invisible pink bluggerflunge called Grangor. He must exist. I feel him in my heart.
At the end of the day, it's up to you to decide if any of these proofs hold up in a court of law, and whether you think they're worth putting your faith in.
I'm sorry, Miss Jackson. Woo! Your God's not real. None of these so-called proofs hold up in a court of law, so I'm certainly not about to put my faith in your God. Okay, I'm done. Well, if you've liked this video and you'd like to see more, then give us a thumbs up and do subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you never miss another video. And as always, thanks for watching.